Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this September 10, 2014 edition of Nightcast. The flag of Scotland, the Saltire. I'm going to run this in the background, friends, as I tell you this. In fact, let's run this forward a moment. The Saltire, the flag of Scotland, has been raised over Downing Street as the leaders of the three major parties come together to implore Scotland to reject independence. It took two attempts after the flag fell down the first time it was raised, but they finally got it up, and as you'll see here in a moment, they fly the flag over Downing Street in London, England, in the UK. There they go. They got it up there. And friends, in our next story, our Prime Minister David Cameron is going to make an impassioned plea to keep Scotland in the Union, saying, "I love my country more than I love my party," you'll hear him say. He was campaigning in Edinburgh, where he said the September 18 independence referendum was about more than being, quote, fed up with the, I'm quoting now, he said it's about more than being fed up with the effing Tories. You'll hear him. Mr. Cameron is in England, he's in Scotland on the same day as Labour leader Ed Miliband and Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg. Scots First Minister Alex Salmond said his opponents could not be trusted. Nick Robertson has this video report.
You're looking at a man who knows that his tombstone may read, the Prime Minister who presided over the breakup of Britain.
I can tell you what the United Kingdom...
You're listening to a man whose voice began to break as he made a plea for Scotland to stay.
It is your decision. It's the Scottish people who decide. But please be in no doubt that the rest of the United Kingdom is watching, listening, holding our breath, and we care passionately about this family of nations, and we would really be desperately sad to see it torn apart.
David Cameron spoke to workers in Edinburgh's financial district in a way he's never spoken before.
I think people can feel it's a bit like a general election, that you make a decision and 5 years later you can make another decision. If you're fed up with the effing Tories, give them a kick and then maybe we'll think again. This is totally different to a general election. This is a decision about not the next 5 years, it's a decision about the next century.
It's a decision that's stirring emotions and testing tempers.
This is the vision we've got for your country.
A passionate debate between Scots about what future their country should choose. Down the road, the other man who should have been in Westminster at Prime Minister's questions. Ed Miliband said he'd come to Scotland to fight for fairness, justice and equality.
I say the best way to achieve those values is together, not apart. I say don't choose an irreversible separation. Choose to stay together on the basis of those values. Solidarity, social justice, together, not alone. From the head, from the heart, from the soul. Vote no in this referendum.
What they are up against is the ever onward march of yes. The campaign that simply can't stop smiling.
We only smile when we're winning.
They believe that every flight from London adds up to thousands more votes for them in Scotland.
What we're seeing today on the other side is Team Westminster jetting up to Scotland for the day because they're panicking in the campaigns.
What you call Team Westminster don't have a vote. The people who may stop you are Team Scotland, who are voting no. Why don't you speak about them more rather than always wanting to talk about people in London?
Well, you know, for the last months, and certainly for the last weeks of the campaign proper, we're engaged in a conversation with our fellow citizens.
Alex Salmond knows that his epitaph could be the man who was the founding father of Scottish independence.
Friends, we're going to come out of that right there. You know, one of the things that could help give the Yes movement even more impotence, or one reason they've got high numbers, is because a report I read today pointed out how there are thousands of Germans who become citizens in Scotland, and citizens from other countries as well, who are very pro-independent Scotland. And we'll discuss that more in another time. We'll also, if the Yes thing succeeds a week from tomorrow, we'll also discuss some prophecies that would show. Well, I'll mention one now. Leviticus 26:19 talks about how God will, if a people of the tribes of Israel and their modern day descendants of Joseph, especially Ephraim, the UK, and Manasseh, the U.S. This verse will relate to the United States as well. If the people and citizens of the country continue to disobey their Creator, because He said, if you obey me, I give you blessings. If you don't, I give you cursings. And if you continue to disobey me by passing such laws as such perverted and idiotic things as same-sex marriage and the like, God says, I'll punish you 7 times more, and then if you continue in your disobedient ways and perversions, then I'll break the pride of your power. And that's part of the curse that he mentions in Leviticus 26, verse 19. Let's just take a quick look at that, and then we're going to go to a video showing how the Queen of England is disposed regarding the possible independence of Scotland from breaking off from the rest of the UK. Leviticus 26, verse 19, how God says, I'll punish you 7 times more, and if you still don't obey, then I will break the pride of your power. And friends, if Scotland breaks off from the rest of the UK, that is a breaking of the pride of the power of the UK. It's one of the tactics that Satan uses against an enemy. Divide and conquer. So you divide the UK up, and they're not going to be as powerful. The two separate from one another won't be as powerful as Scotland being part of the bigger UK. Now, any suggestion in our next video that the Queen, we'll see in this video, any suggestion that the Queen would wish to influence the Scottish referendum campaign is, quote, categorically wrong, according to Buckingham Palace. The statement follows press reports that Her Majesty was concerned about the prospect of Scottish independence. It also follows comments from First Minister Alex Salmond, you saw him in the earlier video, who said the Queen will be proud to be the monarch of an independent Scotland. The palace insisted the referendum was a matter for the people of Scotland. Nicholas Witchell reports.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain?
Her official title is not Queen of England or Queen of Scotland. She is Queen of the United Kingdom. That is the role to which she's devoted the past 62 years of her life as head of state of the United Kingdom. But in the event of a yes vote next week, the proposition put by Alex Salmond is that Scotland and England should revert to how things were more than 300 years ago, with 2 independent nations in effect sharing the same person as head of state. According to Mr. Salmond today, it's all very straightforward.
Her Majesty the Queen, who has seen so many events in the course of her long reign, will be proud to be Queen of Scots, as indeed we have been proud to have her as monarch of this land.
You think or you know? You think or you know? Have you discussed it with her?
Well, the proper position, of course, I had an audience at Balmoral just some 2 weeks ago, But the proper position is you don't discuss these matters in public.
Some press reports have said the Queen is being urged to speak out in favour of the Union. She won't. Buckingham Palace tonight warned politicians to keep her out of things. A spokesman said, any suggestion that the Queen should wish to influence the outcome of the current referendum campaign is categorically wrong. This is a matter for the people of Scotland.
The number one rule about having a constitutional monarch is they are not politicised, that nobody in their kingdom can suggest that in any way they're politically partisan.
That said, there was one occasion when the Queen did speak up in favour of the Union. It was 1977. Devolution was just beginning.
I cannot forget that I was crowned Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Ever since then, she's kept her views to herself. Yet this monarch, whose mother was Scottish and whose adult life has been devoted to Britain, will be watching matters very closely. The Queen will accept the referendum result, whatever it is. That's her duty as a constitutional monarch. But nobody should be in any doubt. Any breakup of the United Kingdom would be a matter of deep, private sadness to her. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. At the end of the program tonight, friends, we'll come back to the Scotland referendum with a video that answers the question, what does it mean to be Scottish? We'll also have a story about the EU and the UK later and a certain favour that's been extended to the UK by the present EU membership. We're going to turn next to the Middle East. Can the Middle East defeat IS militants? BBC correspondents across the Middle East consider the threat posed by Islamic State militants who are growing in strength in Iraq and Syria. Rafid Jabouri reports from Baghdad.
The Islamic State have pushed Iraq into the brink of a breakup. After their advance in June, they are now in control of a large part of the country, the part where the Sunni community lives. IS have effectively exploited the divisions between the Sunnis in Iraq and the Shia-led government. Now there is a new national government in place, but it needs to gain the trust and the support of all Iraq's communities in order to succeed in its confrontation with IS.
This is just a tiny fraction of the hundreds of thousands of displaced Iraqis who flooded here into Kurdistan for safety after what IS has done. These people here are Christians. They and other minorities, especially the Yazidis, have been particularly hard hit. What they all have in common, though, is one thing. None of them knows when or even whether they'll be able to go home.
This whole village is in mourning for a Lebanese army soldier captured and beheaded by the Islamic State. A second soldier was killed, and there are 30 others held captive by a coalition of jihadi groups. There are fears that if more soldiers are killed, there will be revenge attacks, either against Syrians in Lebanon or across Lebanon's sectarian divide, Sunni against Shiite. This could be the most serious threat to Lebanon's peace since the civil war began in Syria over the border, and the Islamic State is at the centre of the crisis.
This river forms part of Turkey's 900-kilometre-long border with Syria. Northern Syria is just beyond that clump of trees. As Islamic State militants have grown in strength, the Turkish military has hugely increased patrols on this border. Turkey was heavily criticised early on in the Syrian uprising for failing to distinguish between the different Syrian opposition groups, allowing resources, fighters and weapons to cross its borders and end up in jihadi hands, something it disputes. But with the growing threat of IS, and after 49 Turkish diplomats were kidnapped by the group in Iraq in June and are still being held, Ankara has clamped down hard with more checkpoints, arrests and patrols. The question is it too little, too late?
Okay, friends, what we had there, just so you'll know, beside Rafi Jabouri reporting from Baghdad, we had Jim Muir in Erbil and Paul Woods giving the view from Lebanon, and Mark Lowen with considering Turkey's response. In our next video with Quentin Somerville, we'll see what the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is up to there.
Back in Iraq and ready to take on the Islamic State, the U.S. Secretary of State is drumming up Arab support for a counter-offensive.
I will be meeting with leaders from across the region and beyond in order to discuss how can we best build on the work that has already been done and to assemble the broadest possible coalition for this fight. Nearly every country on earth could have an ability and an interest to join in this effort.
Iraq's been asking for help since last year, but the government here was divided and the country split along sectarian and ethnic lines. Secretary Kerry met the new Prime Minister. He's promising greater unity. That meets a precondition for American support.
Our role is to defend our country, but the international community is responsible to protect Iraq and protect Iraqis in the whole region.
The Islamic State last year took over Iraq's Fallujah. Their control spread across to the Syrian border, and in June, Mosul fell. A self-declared Islamic State was created across Iraq and Syria. Iraq's politicians warned for a long time that the war in Syria would spread here. Sectarian divisions widened in Iraq, and the Islamic State moved in to exploit that gap. Healing those divisions will take a long time. Even with US support, the fight to take back Iraq from the Islamic State will be a long one. In the northeast, the Peshmerga, Iraqi Kurdish forces, have struggled with outdated weaponry and limited supplies in their fight against IS. Britain's given more than £500,000 in aid to buy new guns and more ammunition. US airstrikes are already making a difference here. On the ground, they're helping Iraq and Kurdish forces win back territory from the Islamic State. A broadening of this air campaign is expected.
It's very useful, and we are very thankful to everything that the US is doing so far. But I don't think it's enough. We believe that the strikes should target the nerve system and the leadership of ISIS, wherever they may be, even in Syria.
The details of how much support these Kurdish and Iraqi troops will receive in their fight will come with President Obama's speech later today. But Iraq's support will be vital. If it can overcome its own internal divisions, the fight back against the Islamic State can begin in earnest. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Baghdad.
And friends, what you were seeing there a moment ago was you were seeing at the opening of the video, United States Secretary of State John Kerry in Baghdad, where he's now on tour and working to put together that coalition that you heard about in the report. Now, in our next story, this relates to the pale horse, because of the element where Jesus Christ mentioned beside Loimus disease epidemics, he mentioned seismic activity and the commotions in the air and commotions on the ground. And more than 700,000 villagers have been forced to flee their homes, with 254 reported to have died in the past few days. Parts of Indian-administered Kashmir have also been badly affected. And I think since our notes were written, you may hear the figure go up to something like 450 have been killed. Of the many thousands, hundreds of thousands displaced in Pakistan, they almost sound like the children of Israel and following Moses around the deserts of the Middle East. They've been complaining of poor emergency food supplies and a slow response to rescue people who are still trapped by the floods. Andrew North reports from Jang in Pakistan's Punjab province.
And
As the waters keep rising, tempers are starting to boil over, with the Pakistani authorities increasingly feeling the heat.
What's happening here is that there's a protest by people displaced by the flood who've now blocked the only passable road here. And what they're protesting about is they're saying they're not getting enough help. They had rations for 3 days, that's run out, they say, and they're not getting any more. They're also complaining that there are still relatives who are stuck out in the houses who are not being rescued.
And the calls for help keep coming, with the waters still spreading.
This area near Jung City has been hit by a surge of new flooding, and the water levels are still rising. And to give you some idea of the scale of it, the River Chenab, where this water is coming from, is at least 4 kilometres away in the distance. So everything in between has been entirely covered in water, and that means hundreds of villages. The flooding has now displaced tens of thousands of people, and many of them have come to high points like this dike, hoping that here they'll be safe. You can see they've brought their belongings with them. These are rope beds they used to sleep on. Just there's a big bag of hay for the animals. Everyone here has been bringing their livestock with them. But some people thought, here at least, they would be safe from the waters. They wouldn't get any closer. But this is one large extended family that's been here several days, and they've now found the waters coming right up to their tent.
Now the government is telling them they'll have to move again. Where will we go? Asked Bakat Bari, mother of 10 children. No one's come to give us help so far.
The Pakistani army has a large presence here, and its soldiers have been helping rescue people who are still stranded in houses that have been surrounded by the floodwaters. But when it comes to the actual relief effort, giving food and water to people, most of that is being done by volunteers from Islamic charities like this one. Other Islamic groups are providing medical assistance. It's filling a need, but for a disaster this size, many see it as sticking plaster, and they want the government to be doing much more. Andrew North, BBC News, in the city of Jung in Pakistan.
Friends, on our next story related to the EU, and actually, I wish I had some little stars I could put up on the screen, because this next story will really, in effect, relate to the coming together of the preparations toward the coming together of the fifth seal that will have, as part of its doings, the revival of the old Holy Roman Empire, and the coming together, as we'll first see it, as a United States of Europe that eventually is composed or comprised of 10 regions or nations that will give their power to one very strong dictator. The President Commission leader that has just appointed positions of power to the UK and France. He's putting this together with the help of, let's just tell it like it is, with the help of the God of this world, to make this thing, well, I'm going to give you a quote at the end of this introduction to this next video. Here's what he's done for the UK. The UK will oversee financial services in the new 28-strong European Commission, which was a surprise move that delighted the UK's Prime Minister David Cameron. The job goes to Jonathan Hill, former leader of the House of Lords. France, Brother Reuben also got a powerful post. Ex-finance minister Pierre Moscovici, a socialist, will run EU economic policy. There's been intense national rivalry over the top jobs for this EU Commission. There are 7 vice presidents for key areas such as growth, better regulation, and energy. Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker announced the details, saying the new team was geared, you'll hear him say this in this video, the new team was geared to give Europe its new start.
I always intended to give a major portfolio to the British Commissioner, not at least to avoid the impression that I could and would be angry as far as the decision-making process strongly influenced by Britain is concerned. I do think that Britain is a very important member of the European Union. I do want Britain to stay as an active, constructive member of the European Union. I don't want to see the British leaving the European Union because we would lose all the virtues Britain is representing. So I decided to give a major portfolio to Lord Hill, and he, as he has a biography composed by two dimensions. A political one, he was closely working with my good friend Kenneth Clarke for years, and with John Major, another good friend, and he has a particular knowledge of the real economy. So I really do think that he will be the best commissioner to be put there.
I'm sure you are following events closely in the UK. David Cameron said today a sure way for Scotland to leave the EU is a yes vote for independence because the Spanish might block re-entry. What's your view of that?
I do think that it would be totally unwise to dedicate particular remarks to the Scottish referendum. This is a question the Scots have to deal with, this is a question the UK has to deal with, and as I said, the Commission should not take influence on each and every part of domestic and national life. It would be wise to be not as vague as possible, not to take some influence on the sovereign decision of the British and of the Scottish.
Friends, I told you at the beginning we would play a video toward the end, prepared by the BBC, featuring Lucy Hockings asking and answering the question, what does it mean to be Scottish?
Scotland has been part of the United Kingdom for over 300 years. It is physically different from the lochs and glens of the Highlands to the cobbled street and castle here in Edinburgh. But as the vote over independence looms, many people here are asking, what does it mean to be Scottish? So what about the national dress here in Scotland? The colour and type of tartan that you wore could tell people what family you belong to and where you were from. John, what role does tartan and kilts especially play in your sense of national identity?
It's a fantastic looking outfit, you know, it's very, very smart. We just take immense pride in wearing it and showing people we're Scottish, and we often look better than everyone else at a function because we're wearing a kilt.
We couldn't come to Scotland without introducing you to the national drink. It is, of course, Scotch whisky, first made here in 1494. It's now exported to over 200 countries around the world, and it's a massive industry worth $10 billion to Scotland. Paul, what are we drinking today?
We're drinking a Highland single malt Scotch whisky. It's about 13 years old, notes of vanilla and a subtle hint of honey.
Well, I thought it would be rude to leave without a wee dram. Cheers.
Slange.
No matter where you are in the world, you'll always be able to get a heartfelt opinion from a local taxi driver. So what does it mean to you to be Scottish?
Me personally, it's just your country, it's your nation, it's your heritage. I don't know, it's quite a difficult thing to explain, eh?
So castles, whisky and tartan. We haven't even mentioned shortbread, haggis or golf, but many Scots would say that these are just stereotypes. They would point to this, the land of their ancestors. The Scots' unique sense of humour, their sense of egalitarianism and the liberal culture. Those are the things that they say make them proud to be Scottish. How these sentiments will play out in next week's referendum though, well, we'll have to wait and see. Lucy Hockings, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Friends, in just over a week, the future of Scotland decided. Will it remain within the UK or break away and become dependent? The debate is raising many questions about national identity, and the video we just played you with Lucy Hockings reporting from Edinburgh hopefully gave you a little bit of a taste of that maybe you didn't have or know before. That's it for our report tonight, friends, here on Nightcast. God willing, and the banks don't overflow from the creek, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Thursday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying good night, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.